In this video, we're going to talk about the version control, and we will introduce the Git and GitHub. So, what is the problem that we are trying to solve using this version control? Now, the problem is that when we working in a team and we are working on shared resources, sometimes we may have conflict. So the changes one person may conflict with the changes with another person make. Even if you're not working in a team and working on your own in a long-term project, you may need to use a version control system because there is a chance that you may override changes that you made. So you may overwrite and lose some information that you need. All right, so this is a problem. Keeping version and avoiding conflicts and overwriting. So version control systems, different versions of the same file or the same resource, sometimes called versions and other times called revisions. So that's why here it's referred to with R for revision. Okay, so either a version or revision, we are talking about the same thing. So generally speaking, you have a file and you made changes, so that would be version 1. You made other changes, that would be version 2. And then another set of changes, so that would be version 3 of the same file. Okay, now there are basic differences between the changes. Okay, so that would make some systems like Git keeps track of the changes or the differences between the different versions. Okay, so let's see how it's very important if we are going to use a version control to understand the concept of a repository. So what happened is that a repository is a central place where the main content would be stored, and anyone who wants to work with this content would check out. Okay, we're going to talk about the different commands or the different concepts. Pretty much, we have a database of versions. Okay, so different versions of the file is stored in a database. We call this database a repo or a repository. Okay, so anyone who wants to work with this takes a copy of that the file from the repository, make the changes, and then return it back. Okay, so there are two types of a version control system. There's a centralized version control. That's when the repository is shared by everybody, and there's a distributed version control. So in the decentralized, there is only one repository. Okay, so one centralized repository and everybody works on it. So anyone want to make updates, they make their updates and then commit them to that centralized repository. Anyone who wants to see the updates of others will update their own working version from a working copy from the central repository. Okay, so examples like CVS and the Subversion are so these are examples of centralized version control. Now, there is a decentralized or distributed version control in which each team member would have a copy of the repository. So there is the concept of remote repository, and then each working station or each team member would have a local copy of that remote repository. Okay, so if you make changes in your local, so this is the working copy. You make changes, you commit them into your local repository first, and then if you want other people to see your changes, you can push them to the remote repository. Okay, so there's a layer of security here that you can test your own changes in your local repository, and if there is no problem, then you can push them so that everybody can see. Okay, but also if something happened to the remote repository and we lost it for some reason, it's not a big deal because we still have at least close copies of that remote repository, so we didn't lose everything. All right, now Git, the very popular source control or version control, is a distributed version control system. And you can install it. It is very popular. It is pretty much a tool that you can work with in a command line. But almost every IDE has some sort of integration with Git. Okay, so with Git, you would need to have a remote repository and a local repository. So you can have your own server if you're working in in a company and you have workstation that you allocate as the server. So you can install Git on that workstation, and everybody would treat that as the remote repository. Or you can use a service like GitHub. So GitHub is just a remote repository service. Instead of having your own installation for a server, so GitHub, you can use GitHub instead. Okay, so GitHub provides a lot of services other than the Git, other than the remote repository. But this is the remote repository is what we talking about right now. Okay, so you can use GitHub as your remote repository, but you will have to have your own local repository as well. Okay, uh, so so uh, you would have a working directory. So this is just a directory in which you have the file, the version of the file or the copy of the file that you work with. So that's why it's called working directory or the workspace. Okay, the local repository is also another directory. So when you say like you step inside the working directory and you initiate the repository, so you use the init command, another directory with the name .git will be created. Okay, so that will be containing the revisions of the file. So let's say we have one file that we're working with. The actual file, it will be here uh, so that you can edit it. And then whenever you have a version that you want to store in the local repository, another copy will be stored inside that directory with the name .git. Okay, so this is the general process. So in your local computer, you will have two directories. Oftentimes, you would have this .git inside the working directory. Okay, in the next video, we are going to take an example and we take it step by step on how it works. All right, so we'll see you there.